Today on Network Africa, the Monetary Policy Committee votes to keep inflation rate at 14%. And the Kenyan government is accused of failing to meet its obligations to refugees in the Dadaab camp. Plus, the United Nations wades into political tension in the Democratic Republic of Congo, calling on security forces to show restraint. Let's begin Network Africa now. Welcome to Network Africa. I am Bisi Adebayo. Two Sudanese journalists have spent some time in jail for reporting on the meeting of the South Sudanese group in the country's capital, Khartoum. The group's leader, ousted Vice President Riek Machar, is spending some time in the country, having left the neighboring South Sudan. The journalists, identified as Tariq Abdullah and Murtada Ahmed, were reportedly detained for a day. The move has been condemned by the Sudan Journalist Network, alleging that it's an infringement on the freedom of the press. Dispute over maritime border between Somalia and Kenya is still being hashed out in the court in The Hague. Both countries locked in a legal battle over the location of part of their common maritime border. Somalia said Kenya was unnecessarily prolonging the struggle over the potentially lucrative waters, which are sought to hold oil and gas reserves. Yesterday, Kenya described Somalia's claims that it sought to steal the oil and gas reserves as absurd and hurtful. The case was taken to The Hague by Somalia after it tried and failed to negotiate with Kenya. Now, the Kenyan government has come under pressure following a report by international rights group Human Rights Watch reports last week over its plans to move refugees from the country's Dadaab camp to Somalia. Kenya's reasons for the move is that Al-Shabaab has used the camp as a recruiting ground to launch attacks on Kenya and has rejected allegations by Human Rights Watch that it's harassing and intimidating Somali refugees to return home when it's not safe to do so. It plans to shut the camp by November this year. The UN Refugee Agency says there are 350,000 Somali refugees in Kenya based in the Dadaab camp. Forcible repatriation of refugees back to Somalia, it says, will be giving Al-Shabaab a recruiting opportunity. Al-Shabaab ruled most of southern Somalia from 2006 until 2011, when the African Union mission in Somalia forces drove them out of Mogadishu and other urban areas.
The Somali Islamist group, Al-Shabaab, has used the camp as a recruiting ground to launch attacks on Kenya and has rejected allegations by Human Rights Watch that it is harassing and intimidating Somali refugees to return home when it is not safe to do so. According to UN Refugee Agency, UNHCR, there are 350,000 Somali refugees in Kenya based at Dadaab camp. Human Rights Watch says forcible repatriation of refugees back to Somalia is giving Al-Shabaab a recruiting opportunity. Aisha Bada is a Human Rights Watch researcher for Somalia.
8% of people who've gone back so far are children. And we spoke to some children, some young men who had returned to Somalia, and when they returned to their areas of origin, which are still controlled by Al-Shabaab, they faced a lot of pressure to join Shabaab. According to the UN, over the last year, there's actually been an increase in recruitment of children by Al-Shabaab. And so, this is a very real fear of people who have gone back.
According to the United Nations, there has been a surge in departures from Dadaab in recent months, with more than 24,000 refugees returning to Somalia since 2014. Human Rights Watch said they interviewed 100 refugees and asylum seekers in Dadaab, some of who had been repatriated but came back to Kenya and many recounted horrific experiences of their time in Somalia. The camp in Somalia was not safe at all. 10 days after I gave birth, at around 3 a.m., a gunman entered my tent and put a gun in my mouth. I had no clothes on my upper body because it was hot that night. He told me to keep quiet. I wanted to shout and cry, but I thought he would kill me, so I just kept quiet. He raped me inside my tent. I would advise these people who are planning to go back to Somalia to stay here in Kenya, because Somalia is not a safe place to live. It's a place where women can be raped easily. The rights group says Kenya is not giving the refugees a real choice between being repatriated or staying, citing past incidents where members of Kenya's Somali refugee population were arrested and deported after a series of deadly Al-Shabaab attacks.
They are very scared. They're very apprehensive about what will happen in November. And we kept hearing refugees saying to us, we're scared we're going to be put on buses come November and we won't get any help. Because if they go now, they get a bit of assistance from the UN. So it's a really difficult situation to be in, because they have seen Kenyan government forces busing people before.
Joseph Irungu is the Principal Administrative Secretary at Kenya's Ministry of Interior and the chairman of the Repatriation Task Force.
The UNHCR was supposed to provide the resources. We are supposed to give these refugees resources as they get back. They are supposed to get non-food items. We need a transport for them. And we also need a package for their resettlement back in Somalia. So that budget has not been, in my opinion, has not been adequate. Because, like I have told you, we have now prepared 126,000 refugees. They are ready. They are sensitized. We have verified them. They are ready to move even tomorrow. But we do not have the requisite capacity to move them.
Somalia continues to face an Islamist insurgency and is struggling to rebuild after decades of conflict.